basketball analysis with over 70 years combined experience.
The Bob Ryan and Jeff Goodman podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time.
It's time for Bob Ryan, Gary Tangwa here, CLNS Media, brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prize Picks. All right, this entire show is dedicated to Celtics 17. Bob, some Celtic fans had a problem with episode 3, I heard, but everybody loved episode 4. And as we get into the 80s, my friend, you are the star or one of the stars of this show.
Obviously, I look back upon it with great fondness, and I will start. I'll set the table this way. In 1979, I had been around on the NBA beat for 10 years. I covered the team from 69 to 76. I got off for a couple of years. I came back in 78, and that was the worst year in the Celtics had and since the 40s. It was the one Celtic team that I ever covered that was not totally racially harmonious. It wasn't good in any way. Satch Sanders got fired. Dave Cowens became the player coach. That was foolish. The McAdoo trade, stupid. Everything went wrong. And it bottomed out in March of 79 in a loss in the Silver Dome when they lost to the Detroit Pistons, coached by Dick Vitale, 160 to 117. And I wrote that it was maybe the nadir of Celtic history, certainly in that group. Well, anyway, in 1978 at the draft, this Brett Auerbach drafts Larry Bird. He had 2 number 1 picks, and I don't know, we'll never know. Red took it to his grave. I should have just asked him flat out, never did. If you only had 1 pick that year, would you have risked drafting Cowens, Bird, not knowing that you're going to be able to sign him? Well, he had 2 picks. The other pick was, by the way, Freeman Williams. So it's 1979, and Bird shows up now, fresh from his great year at Indiana State, the famous game against Michigan State, Magic and all that. And it was, as it turned out, it was for me as if I had signed up for an art course, but I didn't know who the teacher was. I just liked the curriculum. And in the first day of class, in walked the teacher, Michelangelo. And that's the way I looked at Larry Bird entering my professional life. And it affected my professional and personal life because, I wound up writing more words about Larry Bird than anybody ever wrote. I wound up doing a book with Larry Bird. I feel, comfortable with Larry Bird. And so that's that. So that's where we were in 79. And the Celtics entered the 80s with tremendous optimism. They went from 29 victories to 62, the biggest one-season improvement in the history of the league. Now, the way the episode is framed, you would think that it was Larry Bird and only Larry Bird that was responsible for this. Okay, he was the person most responsible for this. But that year, they signed as a free agent ML Carr, who had led the league in minutes played the year before in Detroit. And that's a long story involving reparations. I mean, they had compensations, and they let McAdoo go to Detroit. Bye-bye, no problem, and so forth. Tiny Archibald had been hurt the year before. He had hurt his Achilles, which in those days was a very, very serious thing to have happen. And he had gained weight, and for him, 5 pounds on that little body was a problem. He wasn't himself the year before. Well, he was recovered. He was feeling much better. He was playing better. And so I also got one other component, the equivalent of an extra first-round draft pick, a guy that fell into their lap named Gerald Henderson. So these are new components on the team, not just Larry Bird. And second to Bird in importance, they got a real coach. No, Dave was no longer going to be the coach. They got Bill Fitch, who was the first Celtic coach that was outside the quote-unquote family, as you know. So that all those forces conspired, if you will, or gelled together to create an improvement from 29 to 62. They don't in the episode completely reflect these other aspects the way they should. Fitch to a little degree, but the others aren't even mentioned as being added to the mix. Okay, there we go.
Is Fitch underappreciated?
Well, Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, Bill Fitch was complicated, and they do a very good job of explaining of the how it played itself out. We'll get to the '83 in a second,
Sure.
in a while. But um, he was a real coach, and he coached Larry Bird, and Larry Bird, was this wonderful gem of a player, but he wanted to be coached. He Larry Bird liked authority, and he liked coaching, and Fitch. I remember Fitch telling me during the exhibitions there was something about Bird that needed improvement, and he wasn't going to, they were working on it. And I think it was about just getting the ball quicker, something like that. But there was something that Fitch had spotted, a technical thing that he wanted to help. Wanted to see that Larry improved. But he brought discipline. Oh boy, did he ever! He brought order to the thing, and professionalism. I mean, Dave Cowens was not capable of doing that, and had no desire to do that. He took when they dusted the job on him. It was okay. I'll do whatever you want, Red. But geez, so. Uh, but anyway, so they got a real coach. To answer your question, probably, but he was extremely important to help them turn that corner.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's talk about the, 81 and just why it worked then, and then we can get into why it didn't work in 83.
They were in '81. They had that second year of the Fitch. They had lost. Well, it was a new team, first of all, in the sense that when they lost in 1980 in 5 games to the 76ers after an excellent regular season, it was because they weren't big enough. Their starting front line was 6'8" Cowan, 6'5" ML Carr, and Cedric Maxwell at 6'8". Okay, that was their starting five. Their starting front line. The 76ers came at you with Darryl Dawkins, 6'11", and God knows what, 275. Caldwell Jones, another 6'11", who was an excellent athlete and a good defensive player and a rebounder, and Dr. J, who at 6'5" was 6'5" going on 7 foot. The way he played. He played in the air. And we all know what happened on this incredibly momentous draft day in 1980, in which the Celtics, holding the first pick in the draft, thanks to the machinations of Red, holding the first pick in the draft, was petrified that they were going to take Joe Barry Carroll of Purdue, who I had seen in the tournament, wanted no part of. I wanted no part of Joe Barry. And they walked away from that draft day with Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. Parrish, they traded the 1 and 13 to the Warriors, and they wound up with the third pick. And the third pick was McHale, and they got Parrish. And by the way, the 13th pick the Hawks turned out to be Ricky Brown. So, much forgotten Ricky Brown. So they walk away, and suddenly they're big. Are they big, right? These guys are now, Parrish and McHale are going to be teammates for the next 12 years. So, 12 or 13 years. So that was a momentous draft day. And now they nobody's going to outbig them anymore, and that was very clear. So it was a much better team in '81. And so they hadn't won it yet. They were eager. It was all new and fun and exciting, and so yeah, it was '81. Everybody was pulling together, and Fitch, who eventually wore them out. He hadn't begun to wear them out yet. That would take place a couple years later.
Now, you were close with Bill. You would have breakfast with him or coffee, and you would talk basketball on the road. Oh, how things have changed with the media. But you have a theory about Robert Parrish regarding Bill Fitch.
Yeah, I can tell you that I had remembered distinctly, and I believe at least 2 occasions that we were having this coffee and breakfast on the road, and he said, "I'd love to get my hands on that Robert Parrish," and that's why I think that he was the proponent for that, the catalyst for that deal, not Red.
Right.
I think he told Red, "We want this guy." I never had any evidence that Red had any particular insight into Robert Parrish's game. Okay, but Bill Fitch sure did, and what he thought was he was underused by Al Attles. No disrespect to Al Attles, but he thought that Robert Parrish he loved the way he could get up and down the floor, and he thought he should be running more. And I remember, I can tell you my own self, that in 1976, I believe it was, during the summer, Robert was part of a preparation. Dave Gavitt was coach of the Pan Am team, I believe it was, and they were practicing down at Community College of Rhode Island, as I recall. And I went down to see them, and I was taken and blown away by this athleticism and the way that Robert Parrish, who I only knew as a name, this guy from Centenary. People had, he was at Centenary for 4 years. And in case people want to know, it's located in Shreveport, his hometown, and not many people really at large knew how anything about this guy, and I was taken by how well he could run, so I could relate to that when Bill said that. So yes, I totally believe that the protagonist for that trade was not Red Auerbach, it was Bill Fitch.
We're going to get to 83 in a minute. First, I have to tell you about Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Springtime is here and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players to the diamond in your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick more or less for your shot to win up 1,000 times your cash today. The app is just so easy to use. Okay, you create a lineup. All you have to do is pick more or less on a few player stats for your shot to win up to 1,000 times that money. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed, people. Second half of basketball season is here, and the push to the playoffs is heating up on Prize Picks, and it's the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. So this is how it works. What are you thinking? Thinking that Ohtani for more than one home run, or Julio Rodriguez for more than one stolen base? Pick more or less on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Okay, Bob. So then in 83, which I told you this when I watched the series, I was really disappointed in the Celtics' behavior and the fact that even now they admit that they quit on Fitch. And when I think of a Celtics team quitting, that just doesn't seem to be part of the personality of that organization.
Nobody wants to hear it. It's hard for people to believe, but I have been saying for the 40 years
that
they all the players who mattered, not the 12th man, all the players who mattered quit on Fitch except for Larry. And it was very gratifying to me to hear in episode 4 Robert Parrish use that word.
Right.
And the word was we, and I think it was we, naturally, but quit in that series against Milwaukee. Now, but there's one thing that they don't mention at all, and that was that Larry was sick, missed a game in that series. He wasn't himself physically in that series. But and they were swept. But I felt for years that they quit on him, and apparently, it was pretty evident that it's been very vindicated now by Robert, and that they did. And what was this all about? Well, what it was all about was that Bill Fitch had one gear. He did not have Plan B. He coached hard and sarcastically and aggressively, and he didn't switch. And they got tired of it. And Robert didn't like it from the beginning. He has a good anecdote in there about some time when they had some really good, successful day, and they went into locker rooms expecting to be told how wonderful they were, and he annotated the faults with each player by looking at the stat sheet, and walked out and told everybody what they were doing wrong. And Robert just never warmed up to him. I can tell you that right now. Kevin, in and out. Larry, it just rolled off Larry's back, the water off the back. But Larry doesn't mind coaching. And of course, he's probably going to get yelled at less than anybody else, that's for sure, But still, didn't bother him, but it did bother all the other players and that mattered. And so that was that. And they lost to a pretty good team. The Bucks were a good team,
and they shouldn't have lost. But you had to help out the owner.
And they lost to the Bucks, and I said about the Bucks of the '80s that remember the Celtics and the Sixers were winning 60 games routinely, and the Lakers were the Lakers, and all that. Okay, and in that period of the '80s, the Bucks were very good, but they never did win anything. They haven't won the series anything since 1971 when Kareem was in his second year. Okay, and I said they were what they did. They were here's who they were. They were the good student who looked both ways before crossing, drank their milk to the bottom of the glass, studied their ass off, and still got a B. Yeah, that's who they were. They just weren't they were not A students. They were not the Celtics, they were not the 76ers. But that series they were. The Celtics were in a funk. Okay. Now, when this game 4 is over, I'm in the locker room, and Jim Fitzgerald was the owner of the Bucks, and I don't recall that maybe whether we had any kind of prior discussion or whether he was just feeling it. And he comes up to me and says, "Bob Ryan, were we the better team? Say we were the better team." I said, "Well, you just swept them. I gotta say you're the better team." Even though I really, in my heart of hearts, knew the Celtics had screwed up. But nonetheless, so that was just so funny. He wanted to be vindicated that indeed the Bucks were the better team.
What did that cause any chemistry problems with Larry and the rest of the club?
It's interesting. That's something I'll never know. Exactly what happened. All I know is all was well by the next year. But of course, one very important thing happened in between. That changed the history of the team, and that was picking up Dennis Johnson. And when they took the floor the next year, they had Dennis Johnson make a big difference.
All right, we're going to hear more about Dennis Johnson.
Rick Roby. But for Rick Roby, Jerry Colangelo thought Rick Roby was going to be, and Rick Roby had been a very useful player for the Celtics. In fact, but as an adjunct, a backup big man, but he wasn't exactly a conditioning freak, and he didn't last too much longer in the league with his less than forceful training habits.
Well, and we know that I think he was a drinking buddy of one Larry Bird. So,
well, you know what Larry said famously. That I never would have been MVP if they hadn't traded Rick. They were roommates in the old days. They were roommates, and when they had such a thing, and Larry said that, so we all know what he meant.
I want to get into Dennis Johnson because I don't think his arrival has been talked about enough, but that's coming up. So, if you're looking for tickets to see your favorite team, just download the Game Time app. It's really simple. It's the app with a G on it. And then you can get their new feature called Game Time Picks. Makes getting tickets to see your favorite team play live even easier. Filters out all the fluff. All you have to do is look at the incredible deals on the great seats for where you want to go. So when I go on, you live in Boston, you just look at everything that's going on in Boston. And not just Celtics or Bruins, but also they have plenty of other entertainment, concerts, and so forth as well. Plus, they have the super deal, and you get the best deal on Game Time Picks at that particular time. Curation makes it easier to save on more sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Also, everything is shown up front. No surprise fees at checkout. And they have a seat view. You get panoramic view of your seats from the app before you buy them. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. And they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Bob, let's talk about the arrival of Dennis Johnson, because Dennis Johnson, as we know, was a terrific player with the Seattle Supersonics and kind of had to take a back seat, right, when he got here to Boston?
Well, it was interesting. Dennis Johnson he arrived here with a reputation of being different, and he was forceful personality, and what was with a little bit of trepidation that people welcomed him into Boston because there was this innuendo, if you will, that he was hard to get along with, or he was a handful, or he was trouble of some kind, and that's why Phoenix was willing to let him go, because we knew he was a very good player. Now, their party line was that he wasn't really a pure point guard. He wasn't. He was a hybrid guard on offense. On defense, he was a killer. He's the most destructive, I called him destructive defensive player at the guard position that the Celtics ever had. But he and Walter Davis, that pair had to be broken up as a backcourt. They needed to get a real point guard. And okay. And they needed a big man, and Jerry Colangelo thought that Rick Ruby would solve that for them. So he comes here, and
Yeah, wait a minute. So
prior,
Bob, I might have messed up. I want to get that right, but he was with Seattle and then get traded to Phoenix, right?
I played the Phoenix, and yeah, and right. Well, in Seattle, he was originally Bill Russell saw something in him. He wasn't, his background. He wasn't highly recruited out of college. He went to junior college. He went to Pepperdine. Um, he wasn't anybody special, and then as a rookie, he impresses the hell out of Bill Russell and Lenny Wilkins, and then he in the famous Game 7 in 1978 against the Bucks, against the Bullets, he went 0 for 14 in Game 7 in 1978, and they lose. The next year, they have a rematch with the Bullets, and he scores 20 points a game, and in a 5-game series, blocked 14 shots from the guard position. Think about that. That's how good he could be. Anyway, and he's got this reputation, but he's still got this heart. And I can tell you the truth. Paul Silas once, I was very friendly with Paul Silas, and after he was traded, this Denver, he went eventually to Seattle. I kept in touch with him, and it was one night when they got a game-winning basket out of Gus Williams, and I'm talking to Paul the next day, and basically what he said was, he said, "Well, I'm glad it was anybody but that other asshole," that being Dennis Johnson.
Right.
And so there was a reputation that he carried here. Well, we found out he was happy as hell to be here, number one. And he was on his best behavior, if you will, and from day one here, no problem with that. And also, though, he had a very strong basketball personality. Playing with the big three was tough for a guard. You felt like you were a second fiddle citizen, to when you're playing with, that big three before, was Max, Mikhail, right, and Larry. Great front court. And it didn't bother him. He was going to be Dennis Johnson. He was going to take his shots when he wanted to take his shots. He wasn't going to be intimidated by playing with the big three. He felt he knew who he was. And day one, he fit. He just fit on the court perfectly. And of course, famously, Larry would wind up saying that he was the best player that I ever played with, which you always wondered how that went down with Kevin. To this day, you wonder, how that goes down with Kevin, but and Robert for that matter. But that was he was also obtained for a second reason, that is, they were bedeviled by Andrew Toney. Andrew Toney killed them,
right?
And they were hoping that Quinn Buckner would be an Andrew Toney deterrent, but he wasn't. And Danny was a young player; he wasn't ready to do that. But Dennis Johnson was, and he took care of that matter. So he fulfilled a couple of important things. Now, and DJ was DJ, and really a very specifically
big shot guy.
Interesting.
We needed a big shot.
Shots. And Larry always said that he knew DJ was up for the game, really up for the game when he went to the basket. If DJ goes to the basket early, Larry knows that DJ is really checked in tonight. Because during 85, 86, DJ took a few nights off, and he really did. And he only picked his spots at home against a team you knew they were going to beat. And I remember Danny once saying to me that DJ would say to him, "Okay, you're going to be the man tonight, or you're getting the shots tonight." And if you go study, and I looked this up, and I have notebooks with all the game by game of everybody for the whole 80s, and you can find these games where minutes 25, FGA 4, DJ, as opposed to FGA 14,
right.
FGA, folks, means 15 minutes, just so you know. And you can find these games. He was famous for that, but not when it really mattered. No, nobody was. He was a big game player.
I think it's really too bad too how it ended all with Parrish. How he feels unappreciated. I think because very important part of the team.
Oh, he was, and he was. He was a very sensitive, very interesting man, and very complicated, and personally, no question about it. But extremely important. I think underrated historically player. I think he's a top 10 all-time center, and I really do. And I don't think not everybody appreciates him, but God, the stuff he did, and he sacrificed, and he'll, in his mind, and he was right. He sacrificed a lot. You can see his shots continually went down as Larry's star ascended and Kevin star ascended.
Sure.
The guy who was getting fewer shots, it was Robert. But you look at his record, and it's astonishing. The field goal percentage, year by year with him, the percentages were remarkable. He's a well over 50% career shooter, and kind of ahead of his time a little bit, with this ability to shoot the outside shot at 7 feet. That turnaround jumper of his, we haven't seen anything like it and since then. He would actually have his momentum sometimes carry himself off the court into the benches when he took that turnaround jumper with the momentum that he had. And that was a long shot, and he had the hook shot. He had, and of course he ran the floor. Oh my God, could he run the floor? And which is what Fitch originally loved about him, was the fact that he could run the floor.
Can you imagine Robert Parrish as a three-point shooter? Because he might be today.
Well, I know it's hard to believe, but if you wanted to work on it, but that's somebody with great imponderable we have, looking back, because we know that these guys just wasn't part of their deal. It wasn't anything.
Wasn't McHale taking threes at the end of the run?
McHale, that all happened. It was funny. He wound up making a big three in a playoff game against the Pistons. And it was at the end of the clock kind of thing. It was a circumstantial, it was a freaky thing that he went up taking it. And it's almost like a light bulb went off. Hey, this is cool. Rather than, getting the crap knocked out of me in the low post, started looking around. And yes, so for the last couple of 3 years of his career, he was seeking out threes, which was really, we thought it was funny. But, he definitely, if he did get the message, and that this is safer, a lot better than getting the crap knocked out of you in the low post.
Bob, you want to do some emails?
Sure.
All right. So this is just, if people are listening for the first time, we're doing Celtics 17, Celtics City Wrap once a week. Bill Simmons' terrific series on HBO. So some emails for Bob on this. Randomly decided to look at Charlie Scott's stats before the trade and after the trade, and it was like he and Paul Westphal traded bookends of careers, because Charlie Scott was an all-star scoring 20-plus points a game, then dropped off when he got to the Celtics, and Westphal became an all-star and started scoring 20 points a game. But as we know, Charlie got the ring. So thoughts on that?
And I've had this, I think, corroborated to my satisfaction over the years. Charlie Scott, Don Chaney had left the team to go to the ABA, and Westphal was going to be elevated from third guard to starter alongside JoJo White. And Red felt that they worried that, and Red and Brass worried that JoJo would not be as receptive to having Westphal steal his thunder, if you will, as he should be, and that Westphal, there might be nights when Westphal would get 30 and JoJo would get 10 or 12, and JoJo wasn't going to like that. Charlie, but he would respect Charlie Scott, and the Suns. I don't know whether Jerry Colangelo just. I can't believe that he realized how good Westphal was going to be. We knew but that he was going to turn into what he turned into. But from the Celtics' point of view, that trade was necessary and at the time, and they were willing to go for the short run gain of getting an all-star player and trading away a young guy whose great years were ahead of him if they was going to have great years. And so it turned out both teams were happy in the end. The Celtics got a championship out of Charlie, who gave him a good year. And by the way, during the playoffs in 76, they won 3 6-game series. And in each of the 6 games, Charlie Scott came up very big. Yeah. Very big in each of the 3. And JoJo, they hit it off, and and so but I know people don't understand it because Westfall, I know, I hated the trade because Westfall was a friend. And matter of fact, I had dinner at his house about 3 nights before the trade, and they blindsided him. He had no
Right.
remote indication of thinking about trading him. And of course, he went out to Phoenix, and we all know, it's a Hall of Fame career. He made the Hall
Sure.
of Fame, and he had 5 or 6 tremendous years and got traded, and his career ended early due to injury. But those years in Phoenix, he was a first-team All-League kind of player. And so I know people have a hard time understanding that, but the personal dynamics there were the key to that trade.
Did he get traded for
And
DJ with Seattle?
no, I forget. I forget what the deal was with Seattle. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
But he got
I mean,
hurt, and he went with the Knicks, and the career didn't go as long as it should have. But boy, those peak years, he was tremendous.
well, we were all shocked too as fans because, it looked like he was he was a guy coming off the bench and was a hell of a
He,
player. I
you know,
mean,
he in '84, Game 7, he came off the bench and sparked them
yeah,
in the second
74.
period.
You mean 74?
I mean, no, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah, that's okay. 74, yeah.
he sparked them and in that game, and so anyway, no, you can't say no, and good things about him. And in '76, in Milwaukee in '74, he came off in the second and third quarter and sparked them. So no, he had his moments. Yep.
Okay, this is from Austin Hannon 4197. I personally have John Havlicek, but okay. Let me read this whole thing. By far the best player in NBA history. Pump the brakes, Austin. He's my favorite player too, but the man won 8 NBA finals, more than Michael Jordan's 6. Okay, he also played with Bill Russell. A great shooter and defensive player, criminally underrated. I will agree with the criminally underrated as far as the NBA is concerned, because John was a very quiet guy. He was a very humble guy. Certainly was not a self-promoter, but, he's not Jordan. But underrated, I think we both agree on that.
He's starting to fall through the cracks of history. There's no question, which is criminal, because he wasn't one of the truly great players. I believe. Well, first of all, I think he is. You honor him with faint praise by harping on the 6-man thing. Yes, he was as the greatest 6-man of the mid-sized 6-man type that the game has ever known. When he was, and that was a luxury the Celtics could afford because of the team that he was playing on. He was very fortunate to join the Boston Celtics at the time that he did. They could use him the way he should have been used at that time. He needed to get a shot. He wasn't a great shooter when he came into the NBA. He had to work on his individual offense. Mostly what he did as a rookie was run up and down the floor and catch passes from Kuzi and score 14 points a game. He went home and worked on his shot and came back the next year, and now he's averaging 18 a game because he's making some jump shots, a lot more than he was as a rookie. But he was lucky but that 6-man thing, here's the thing. Red famously said over the years, it wasn't matter who starts, it's who finishes, right? And starting with the second year in the league, he was second on the team in minutes played.
Right.
Even though he didn't start after Russell. Okay. They recognized his value immediately, but they were able to use him in that strategic way because of the team that he was playing with. You look up some of the minutes played by the '68 series, and in '69, the minutes that he got, we were averaging probably over 45 minutes a game.
Right.
And when he became officially a starter in '69, '70, he then would lead the league in minutes played like the next 4 years. So the 6-man thing is he was far more than that. I can tell you that. That's for sure. Far more than that.
I love
player,
this next one's great.
One reason why he doesn't have more all defensive selections is that they didn't have one until they didn't start that. He would have been 2 or 3 more, had 2 or 3 more. And my belief is that for the last 5 years or so of his career, starting in '68, '69, when Oscar Robertson and Jerry West were now around for 8 or 9 years and starting to slip a little, not much, but a little. Uh, he was better than both of them by that time. He was better than both of them. And that's saying a hell of a lot because they were still both very good. That's
Oh my
how
God.
good John Havlicek. And he was the best non-center in the league for at least a 3 or 4 year period there. Now, is he the greatest player of all time? No, but he's got to be on any list of the top dozen players. And if you throw the centers out for a minute, and
Right.
that and he, people, unfortunately, people if people learn about him now, they hear about six man. They don't appreciate. Just go check out the minutes, folks. And he was he was a lot more than a six man.
Oh yeah, he was my favorite player of all time. From Amec 44, Don Chaney is often overlooked from the Celtics' early 70s powerhouses as well. He and the Bulls' Jerry Sloan were the best defensive two guards in the game.
Jerry Sloan. Well, it's a very Emma, you look back at that period of time, and you can make a case that that's a very prescient statement defensively at that time. Both of their reputations were built on defense.
Right.
Sloan a little bit more of an offensive force, but that he had to be for that team. But Chaney was a tremendous defensive player, and by the way, in terms of offense, he actually, when they won 68 games in 72, 73, he averaged about 13 or 14 a game. And by running the floor and getting opportunity points. But I always give credit. Tommy Heinsohn worked with him individually to work on his shot. And Tommy didn't get any credit because people didn't know. I tried to tell him that he was working with Don Chaney and specifically after practices and helping him on his shot, and it worked. But Chaney was never out there to be a big scorer. He was out there to do what he did. He had these incredible long arms. He was strong at 6'5" and was a team-oriented guy. And just a wonderful guy, by the way. It was in a good partnership with JoJo. Perfect compliment that he wasn't going to take shots away from JoJo, and that worked very well. But in terms of this gentleman's premise, that's not a foolish premise. At the time that they played, I would argue that you could make a case that they were the two best defensive guards.
And this is our final email at Basketball Jones, or social media post, however we got these. I love Bob Ryan. The man is on the Mount Rushmore of sports journalism. Imagine stories upon stories. And then all of a sudden he just goes, I once gave Spencer Haywood a ride to the airport. That's another story.
Yeah, I did. I was on a panel at Harvard. Jay Billis was on that panel. I forget who else was on that panel. I don't even know what the topic was. This is, and I wound up giving Spencer Haywood, and believe me, I didn't have a big car. I still don't know how he got that 6'9" frame inside my passenger seat, but he did. So, and by the way, he is one of the unsung heroes, and if we like to say the phrase, breakout stars of the Celtic City series. His appearances are tremendous. He's funny. He's insightful. He's physically, graphically,
He's animated.
Oh man, thank you. I knew there was a good word to describe it. He's very animated. I hope there's more of him, but I don't. I guess it was just everything's going to be a matter of.
Well, he and Cowan seem to have Did he and Cowan have a friendship?
I didn't know. The only guy the only person on another team that I knew Dave. Well, there were two people that he had friendship with. Doug Collins, with whom he shared a basketball camp. Okay,
right.
So Collins was very friendly with Doug Collins, and after they had a fight, which is one of my favorite stories if we have time to tell it, Bob Kaufman, I guess they wound up appreciating each other personally, but that was one of the great, strangest nights I've ever seen in the NBA. Which, all right, very quickly, all right?
Yeah, so we're in Buffalo. Podcast, Bob. You can talk as long as you want.
We're in Buffalo, but it doesn't matter where. I think, and it was on the road, but it could have been in Boston, but I think it was in Buffalo, and playing the Buffalo Braves, and someone makes a basket. And I record it. I'm keeping my running. And while I'm going basket so I hear sound of human flesh. I hear flesh, the first sound of pounding of flesh. And I look up, and these two guys, Bob Kaufman, who's 6'8" and 230, 240, and Dave Cowens, are standing on the foul line. And Cowens has dropped his arms looking at Kaufman. And what has happened is Cowens has just slugged Kaufman. And now it's saying, it's your turn. You and like two Russian lumberjacks with the vodka, so Kaufman punched him back. And when it was over, Cowens had a black eye, and Kaufman had like a jaw dislocation or something, and that was the end of it. They each had their say, and I remember Dave going around had a black eye for a while, and Kaufman they both survived, but they somehow or other that was like a sign of mutual respect after that. And they got along great after that.
That's crazy. Yeah. Well, that's a hockey mentality. But you're right. We can't wait for episode 5. We'll talk about it again next week. And we break it down every week here on CLNS. And this review of Celtic City has been brought to you by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of CLNS Media Network. Pick more, pick less with Prize Picks.